At Talus, we know cybersecurity can be tough and you can't protect everything, but with Talus, you can secure what matters most. With Talus industry-leading platforms, you can protect critical applications, data, and identities, anywhere and at scale with the highest ROI. That's why the most trusted brands and largest banks, retailers, and healthcare companies in the world rely on Talus to protect what matters most: applications, data, and identities. That's Talus, T-H-A-L-E-S. Learn more at talusgroup.com/cyber.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, the podcast for all things neurodivergence. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I'm happy to be your host through the wild trails of the neurodivergent world.
And I'm Jake Noonan, educational coach and humanities teacher, your co-host and producer, and I'm thrilled to help share the stories and the experiences of wonderful people in the world of neurodiversity.
We're really excited for today's guest, which we are going to say a lot because we're always really excited about every guest we get. So let's get into it. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Nerding Out on Neurodiversity. I'm your host, Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist, published author, professional speaker, wearer of many hats. With me, as always, is the Robin to my Batman, Mr. Jake Noonan. Say hi, Jake.
Hey, everybody, great to be here as always. Dr. Matt, I do think we'll have to find out some other sidekick duos as well. You've got Turk and JD, Batman and Robin. We've had like two others. We're going to keep adding to that list.
I mean, I have a lot. You can be my Huey, my Dewey, or my Louie to my Scrooge McDuck.
Can I be all three?
If anybody was, it would be you. There's many great duos throughout history. I will use all of them because, as the listeners know, I do love a tortured pop culture reference. So
yeah, I also like the spinned out stories, with the fan fiction. So when you decided that you were going to be all three, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, I spun into like a horror version of that where they are like a singular entity with three heads.
Like a Frankenstein's monster.
Like a Hydra. Cut one, two are replacing it.
That's amazing.
Got Launchpad.
On that, I think it's a perfect way to transition into introducing our guest today.
You basically introduced herself with that Lovecraftian horror of DuckTales.
Vibes.
Jake, why don't you introduce Rachel?
Why don't I introduce Rachel? Rachel, I think you should introduce yourself because we were talking a little bit before the show, and everything you were talking about, everything we were sharing was amazing.
Oh, thank you. It was fun for me too. So I'm Rachel Klaczewski. I'm a social worker and a sex and relationship therapist. I specialize in polyamory and just the entire realm of sexuality. Career has evolved quite a bit. So, I still also provide services for people with sexual dysfunction, history of trauma, right? So it, has quite the gamut over there. Now I'm at this point where so many of my clients are neurospicy. I like to call it spicy because divergent is talking about diverging from somewhere. But I actually think that we're all on a spectrum. We all have little elements of what we call neurodivergence. And so I like to say we're just spicier. We have a little bit more going on with all of that little sprinkling of stuff. And so they are all late diagnosis folks and they have children. And so just balancing that act of like, is this something that they need to work through? Is this something that I need to address, with support? What is the balance? What is the adversity that is natural that every child has to face? How did I get to where I am if I consider myself successful? Right. So all of these existential questions just start flooding through the second they start seeing their children, behave with spiciness.
All the spiciness. And so I love that whole background. Before we get into all the neurospiciness, give us the origin story. Like, how did you start in this field?
There's a long-winded response. I'm going to try to gist it. Okay, so throughout school, I was always treated like you're too lazy. You're not working to your potential. We can tell that you're smart, but it's not showing up in your work. I was also in a strict program. I was in a religious institute where, they didn't exactly have the most diligence with the people that they hired at the time. I had to really like scratch and claw my way through my education, and, being called lazy quite a bit sucked because I thought I was working really hard. And this created a kind of complex for me. And so socially, that affected my relationship with my peers, where I was constantly on the outside, but for whatever reason, they felt like they could tell me things. They told me some of their deepest, darkest secrets, some of their biggest struggles. And because they assumed that I was always doing worse, they would kind of project so much onto me. And they were like, well, she can't judge me, right? In the meantime, all of what they were projecting onto me was a later in life experience, not at the time. So here I am just saying, oh, I need to give them good information. And I'm at the beginning, right? Like this is the beginning of the internet. And so I'm learning how to do really good research. And then the really good research turns into rabbit holes of information that a good Jewish girl from Brooklyn is not supposed to know, but is there to support her friends. And when I realized that I'm just collecting information and really absorbed into it, I really wanted to understand it a little bit more and feel a little bit more responsible with what I was doing. So I went and I studied psychology, actually unintentionally. I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. Everybody thinks I'm going to do this. And at 18 years old, I was like, I'm not what everybody thinks I am, so I'm not going to do this. And then just out of interest, I ended up being a psychology major. They were like, you should just declare it. You took enough classes. But then also a nutrition minor and a philosophy minor. And I took a bunch of art courses, right? Because I did all the things. And then I refused again to accept my fate as a mental health professional. So I went to work. I was like, I'm not doing this yet. And at some point, the market was crashing. And so working in a nonprofit was a bad idea. And that's when I went to school for social work and finally accepted my fate. But I wanted to have a specialty in sexuality and relationships for my own experiences. I was already involved in the world of polyamory and the world of kink, and realizing that there was a big gap in people's understanding of it. So that was my focus. And then I found other programs to continue my education. That's the short version.
I mean, I love all of that. I mean, one of the things that I've always loved about mental health as a space is it's a place to talk about the stuff that you can't really often talk about in polite society. My first podcast I ever fell in love with was Death, Sex, and Money. And their whole tagline was like, the three things you can't talk about. But I was like, I'm a psychologist. That's all I talk about. Freud wasn't right about a lot of things, but especially here in America, like we have such a complicated relationship with sex, right? It's everywhere. We're not allowed to talk about it. We're not allowed to think about it.
Well, only as long as one type of person is profiting from it. Otherwise, we do not acknowledge it as a reality. Yeah.
Assuming we're all about the same age, like, I think if this generation like sort of knocked down a lot of walls about like gender identity and sexual identity, like I think the generation that's following us, they're the ones who are going to knock down a lot of the walls around like monogamy. Like I think like polyamory is the future, man. And like it's not my thing, but like also like I think that like those sort of like ethical non-monogamous relationships, like I think that the upcoming generation is certainly making that much more mainstream.
Yeah, I actually have a problem with that. So I'm going to nitpick right now. So if we have ethical non-monogamy, what is ethical monogamy?
Ooh, I feel well and duly called out by that. And
Oh no, I'm calling you in. I don't do calling out. I find that to be not productive at all. I'm calling you in. Most people call it ethical non-monogamy, and I have a personal gripe with that because if it's not ethical, it's not non-monogamy. It's a violation, right? The same way that, I mean, not to bring up difficult subject matter, but the same way that rape isn't coerced sex, it's a crime, right? It's a violation. Sex is sex, right? And we don't call drowning failed swimming, right? So we're not going to call non-monogamy ethical non-monogamy because we're not referring to people who are violating the core of a relationship. If you're not being honest with the people that you're intimate with, you're violating things. Now, of course, there's intentional dishonesty, unintentional dishonesty. There's a whole lot of stuff, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But, just like if we're gonna be reductive, anyone who is not practicing ethically or with the intention to be ethical and authentic in their interactions, they're violating their relationships. And so, yeah, if ethical monogamy just means being monogamous, then a lot of people who are doing relationships very badly are ethical.
Right. Absolutely. And not only did I just learn something, which I appreciate, but it's also, that's the space we've tried to create on this podcast, that like, we know a lot of things, but goddamn if we don't know everything about everything, which is why we talk to people like you. We haven't posted the episode with Jessie yet, but she was talking a lot about her journey through, oh gosh, I'm forgetting the word, menopause. And she's like, at one point, she's like, gosh, am I talking too much about this? And Jake and I are like, yeah, no, we don't know jack about this. Please keep using words, right? So like, this is a place to elevate discourse, but also learn from experts. And you're the expert here. So yes, hold us accountable. Absolutely.
Okay, sure. So I think that because we have such a heterocentric, monocentric, ethnocentric identity in America, and it's really rigid, I actually fear how non-monogamy is kind of like being placed into our society. Here I was 18 years old and monogamy didn't make sense to me. It just I didn't understand why people were constantly jealous and possessive of each other. I was like, that feels suffocating to me. I don't like feeling trapped. So maybe this isn't for me. So I went and found some random group in New York, and I show up, and I am the youngest person by at minimum 30 years in that room. Right? All of these people are divorced or in their second or third marriages or whatever, right? They're in their 40s. And they decided to treat me like either their kid or their kid's sister. They were really protective of me. And I learned from people who had to discover this on their own, without the ease of that information, had to confront their ideology, had to adjust themselves to be able to live in that world. And because it's so spoon-fed, what people are actually doing today is monogamy plus, with all of the toxic aspects that our society imposes on relationships. And so it keeps me very busy. Thank you. I will always have a job no matter what I do, to try to change that, and make things better. But I do fear how the ease in which this has become available, that people aren't doing their due diligence to show up. They're often very reactive. And again, if we're including that non-monogamous folks are often neurospicy as well, we can see a lot of impulsive reactivity to information, very quick attachment to learning something new that resonates, and then not doing the adequate critical thinking and integration of that information. And then when you add youth to that, right? When you're adding, right, the wisdom that doesn't get there yet because you just haven't existed in the world long enough to have it. This isn't the kind of wisdom that one could have without time, right? You need to see the passage of time to understand it, right? When you really add all of that, I see the disasters. I see the problems with it. This doesn't mean that I don't want people to engage with non-monogamy. I think it's great that they are. But I also don't want people to believe that non-monogamy is morally superior or, the new way of doing things or the young way of doing things. It's not. It's just another thing that you can try, right? It's like the difference between wearing a blue shirt and a yellow shirt. They're a shirt. One is blue, one is yellow. One is not more superior than the other. One is not more progressive or evolutionarily better in any way, shape, or form. But this is how the younger generation is approaching non-monogamy. Not to say that millennials didn't. It was my biggest fight because I was also young at the time. So I'd be like, can you just shut the F up about that? It is not better. It's like, it's so hard to do this. Yeah, there's a lot of ego involved with, trying to do something with your relationships that might not be authentic to you, but because you think it's ideologically better.
Well, and as we know, gifted and other neurospicy people certainly love to take a ethical high ground, let's say. Like, well, yes, this thing I'm doing is superior.
I know. The virtue signaling, it's like adorable, except also dangerous.
Like, I once made the mistake of saying to one of my clients that I thought Linux had some benefits as a programming system, and I think I'm actually still in that conversation. Like it was like the old RCA ads where like they turned on the speakers. It was like,
Yeah.
I was like, okay, 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 okay.
My brothers are inclined to agree. I don't have feelings either way.
So let's explore a little bit we know that neurodivergent people are significantly more likely to be LGBTQ. We know neurodivergent people are significantly more likely to be in polyamorous relationships. Putting on your professional hat here, Rachel, like, what do you think's the connection there? Like, is it a where there's smoke, there's fire situation? Is it correlation, not causation? Where are we at here?
I kind of like to look at this more in the concept of like philosophically or even existentially. I think because we have such rigidity in the world that we live in, the second you are leaving that rigidity in any form that is like not superficial, right? Like we're talking about a very real, socially stigmatized, usually experience of not fitting in. Other aspects of you are going to be highlighted. So Foucault actually said everything exists in the context of its counterpart. Right now, understanding that he was a gay man at a time where that was illegal, he was going to be killed for being gay. So he says, I don't want to give a shit about the fact that I'm a homosexual man. I don't care about that so much. You care about that. And because you have made it illegal, you have made it such a problem. Now this identity emerges from me, right? And so I think that neurospiciness and queer identity, we're just constantly living on some kind of outskirt of these very rigid spaces. And so I think we are often very attracted to each other in that way. We also experience attraction differently. Some people are going to immediately like see somebody sexy and have the sexy feelings. And that's where we have impulsivity, novelty, right? All of that fun stuff that happens. And then like various experience with touch sensitivity, where we either like we like to be touched a certain way, and then that's all we want, right? For that dopamine hit. And then it's again like fighting our identity in the context of where we are. And so if we're gonna put it all together, the only reason we are considered any kind of disability, right? ADHD, the D is disability. ASD, the D is disability. Anxiety is a normal emotional experience. The fact that it is overwhelming makes it a disability, but we call it a disorder, right? So we've only disordered these things because our world perceives everything outside of what it considers acceptable as a disorder. So I don't believe we would have a queer identity without sex negativity and heteronormativity. So I think it's connected because if you're likely to be on the edge of something, you're on the edge of many things, right? Like it's just kind of how that goes. We also found genetically, I don't know how people feel about it. I like to call, am I allowed to use swear words?
I mean, I've already cussed several times.
Oh, you have. You see, it's just like such language that I don't even hear it from other people anymore. So I like to call it the motherfucker gene because it's MTHFR, so it looks like motherfucker. And it includes, right, like POTS, anxiety, physical pain in certain ways, EDS, autism, ADHD, and a lot of people with queer identities experience all of this too, and they believe that it's connected to that gene. There are several versions of that gene as well, so depends which one you have, it's going to light up different things. And so this is where we see, like, they call it the T-Rex stance, like where you're not sure where something is, and so your hands are like this, or you sleep with your hands curved like that. And it's connected to that same genetic link. we can look at it evolutionarily, we could look at it genetically, we could look at it phenomenologically, but all in all, we're not really supposed to be outskirts. Like 40% of Gen Z identifies as queer. That's not a minority. Like,
Not anymore, right? Yeah. One of my kids said this to me once, and it's always sort of stuck in my brain. She said to me, she's like, I think that gifted kids are so aware of what they're told to do that they naturally question why we're told to do that. It's like, well, men marry women. Like, why is that? Why is that a thing? Like, I could marry anybody. I could marry nobody. I could marry several people. Like, and I remember hearing so much growing up, like, well, someday you're gonna have a boyfriend. And she's like, well, you know what? Like, maybe I don't want a boyfriend. Maybe I want a girlfriend. She's like, I think our willingness and our proclivity to ask those questions internally ultimately shows up as behavior, which is more of an external thing.
right.
Once again, I'm not trying to say that neurodivergence is superior like anything else we've talked about today, but I think there's a willingness and openness to challenge norms that can be beneficial in this way.
Yeah. And sometimes it actually shows up as rigidity because of fear. So what we're questioning can be really terrifying to us. And so we're going to become extra obedient, right? So we'll often see a lot of very religious people, who are neurospicy. And we actually see more of that with autistic folks than we see with ADHD folks. Again, this isn't a better or worse situation. It's just that ADHD folks are known to be, again, more, I don't want to say impulsive, but more inclined to act on their questions because they have a harder time keeping it still inside. Whereas an autistic person has to exist within rigidity because they are often perceived more diverse than what is acceptable in society. So they have to mask harder in many, many ways. Now, of course, again, it's a spectrum and everybody has a different way of existing, but the routine and rigidity elements that we do see with autistic like expression, right, outer behavior is very socially accepted, right? We see it a lot in successful experiences, right? So we can kind of understand why they're inclined. Our rigidity, like ADHD rigidity, it's considered stubborn, sometimes even considered like violent, in some ways where it's like, get off me, like I'm against this, right? So when ADHD folks are rigid, they're considered, not compliant with society, very disobedient. So they have a harder time being obedient and sticking to something habitually.
You just reminded me actually of speaking of the obedience thing. I went to Hebrew school growing up, and being told some of the stories from like a religious aspect and being told like you have to believe this thing and that thing and this thing over here, and then just being like, but why? Why though? Okay, but why? Like over and over again, like not good.
And that's the thing. Because what amazes me is that Judaism is like meant for ADHD because you're supposed to ask why, you're supposed to rabbit hole. If you like read the Talmud, it is one rabbit hole. I was like, they all have ADHD. Like all of these people that are talking in this text, they're all talking over each other. It's like so clear that like collaborative communication, but they're also talking over each other. And religious institutions that just want to get you through a curriculum, which is very anti the way we learn, don't want to hear the question why. They're just like, accept this, right? And that's across the board. Math, why do we do it this way? Why is this the step? How does this work? They don't like those questions. Just do it.
That's like one of the best math teachers I ever met, and like we're still really good friends. Like I absolutely love him. Took that into context, and we both taught our different subjects from more of like a philosophical realm. So he is ADHD and understood that like, yeah, I can't just put like 2 + 2 on the board and be like, this is why, like just do it. He was like, I'm going to give you all the context behind the things. And like, rather than, just put the problem on the board, let's talk about why it happened, how it got there, the history behind it. Like who thought of this thing? Can you still do it this way? Can you think of a different way to do it? So like actually challenging and bring in the different thought processes.
I love that so much.
Like I was just really impressed with him with
Yeah,
that.
which is what Common Core math is today. So when everybody got mad about it, I was like, but it's so smart. Like I wish I learned math this way because that's how I do it internally. But I understand the politics around it. Just it happens to be a more intuitive process with math that I happen to adore. And I watch my own daughter learning it. I'm like, oh, it feels so nice, and I'm also jealous. Right. Like, I'm jealous that I didn't have this beautiful experience, but I'm so happy for you that you get to have it, which is lovely.
Rachel, you just brought this up and it brought up a question for me that I hope you don't mind answering. So you mentioned that you have a daughter, and I don't know if you have any other kids. I was like, I didn't think so, but I try not to make those assumptions. So what does your facility with and comfort with sexuality, how does that show up in your parenting?
Oh, well, growing up in a home where I was just told what the rules were, and the rules were never direct because you're not supposed to talk about sex, which I thought was kind of hilarious. Both my parents are immigrants. Neither of them are from here. So neither of them have the same puritanical background that they raised me in. So the conversation around sex was different. It wasn't a direct conversation. It was almost like an expectation that was told only to me as the only girl, which was, being a virgin when I got married was such a lovely thing for me and your father. And I was like, and then I did this thing. You were the virgin, but dad wasn't. And my mom was like, shut up. Right. So she didn't expect that from me. And then again, because I couldn't keep the thoughts in my head, it was, well, that's not what I intend to do. And she was like, why would you say that? She got so mad at me. And again, my mom is from an Arab background. So not only are they boomers, also Arab. So hitting was part of my upbringing. And that was a straight shot to a smack across the face. Today we laugh about it. Then I was very mad. I was like, why are you mad at me? You don't want me to lie. So I just told you the truth. Yeah, I was definitely difficult for my mom, who very evidently has ADHD. So I was a very difficult child for her. Also never got treated or help. So when I see my daughter is, I mean, I hate to say it this way because it sounds very self-centered, but she's an opportunity to heal. I mean, obviously, she's her own person and she has her own experiences. So it's very hard for me not to project my own experiences onto her. But it's also just like really hearing what she's saying, listening to what she's saying, and then reaching inside of my own self and my own history to be like, have I felt that before? Right? Like, oh, I understand this feeling. So I'm very emotionally communicating with my daughter. So I'm often saying to her, hey, I feel what you're describing. I feel it like this in my body. How do you feel it in your body? And often we're able to identify that, these stomach aches that she's randomly having are actually associated with something like anxiety provoking, that like she's worried that she's going to bump into somebody in school who has been treating her poorly, or, like where she's not going to know what to say, or, she's like worried about something going on. So when it comes to sex, I treat it the same way. It's a reality. And if she's old enough to ask, she's old enough for an answer. It is just up to me to learn how to be age appropriate with my answer, which just sometimes is difficult. So by 3 years old, she knew what a period was because I didn't know which point to stop answering. But she knew, and she's fine now. She's 10, so. But, we make mistakes. And I think that's the other part, is gifting myself the grace that I also didn't have as a child. And like, you're going to fuck up. Like you're going to fuck up, and then you own it, and then you work through it. And that's just what happens. Like, that's what we do.
I mean, I think that in so many spaces, parents are too hard on themselves anyway, but like specifically, it's like, well, I didn't have the sex conversation right, so I can't have it. It's like, have you done anything parenting perfectly? Did your kid never fall off their bike? Did your kid tie their shoes on their first time? Of course they fucking didn't, right? Like, come on, like you're going to screw up and you're going to get awkward. I tell this story often, like, when I worked in community mental health, one of the questions on our screener was like sexual activity, which is always super fun as a late 20s, early 30s white dude saying this to like a largely like African American clientele. Are you having anal sex? Like, why are you asking me that? I was like, because it's on the form.
Right. Blame the form, Matt. Blame the form.
Oh, here it's on the form. I don't want to. Right. And it's like, but as the year went on, I got more comfortable with that question. Like, it never my favorite question to ask, but like, those are things like you don't have to get it right the first time as long as we are moving in a direction of knowledge and empowerment and connection. And I think that's the thing all parents need to hear, because it just, for whatever reason, I think it's partly because this puritanical stuff you mentioned, it's just the stakes around sex feel so high.
Yeah, I used to do some education work, and then like it kind of slowed down like during COVID because it was in person. So I used to go to local community centers and libraries, and we would find parents of queer kids. And I would give them sex education for your queer child, right? Like, so you as a parent know how to provide the sex education to a child who's not having the same sex as you because you are probably straight, right? This is really who we were looking at. And so when I started talking about masturbation, I would see all the parents just kind of like getting very uncomfortable. And I was like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, oh, it's not comfortable. I was like, well, what's the point of masturbation? And they're like, and then eventually we would break it down to pleasure, that like the concept of pleasure was so weird. And I was like, I'm sorry to tell you, but your children are not trying to have sex to make babies. That's not their concern. And I'm pretty sure most of the time that anyone in this room is having sex, it's not to make babies. So what do we really need to be talking about here? What is it that we're like, when we really are feeling uncomfortable, what we're uncomfortable about is the concept of pleasure. And sometimes I'll use the word pleasure and everybody thinks I'm talking about sex. And I'm like, eating a good meal is pleasurable. Getting a massage is not necessarily a sexual experience, and that's pleasurable. Going on a drive on a clear road on a beautiful day with your best songs on, like that's pleasure, right? Not all pleasure is sex. And I don't think that they just project that onto me because of my work. I think that everybody just immediately goes to sex because it's the subject that we're not allowed to discuss. So anything anybody says has a double entendre, right? Like, even that phrase, double entendre, has a double entendre. So I know that I would have anything I said, and then there was always like one dude in the room that would go, right? Like I couldn't say anything, right? Or noise. That was early millennial sex education situations, right? So yeah, I get it. Pleasure and the concept of pleasure, non-utilitarian sex is a very scary subject matter to most people, especially when it comes to their kids. And I'm like, why? You like it so much.
Do you really think your kids aren't going to?
I do this exercise when I give talks, and I'm talking about how hard it is to maintain focus. I was like, how many of you guys have checked your phone since I've started talking however minutes ago? And like they look around, I was like, guys, I'm a child psychologist from New Jersey. I am like immune to insults. They all raise their hands. I'm like, I would love to do that next time I give a sex ed talk. I want to be like, how many of you guys have masturbated in the last week?
Yeah.
You just see everyone's hands just start shooting up without any hesitation.
If only we could live in that world, right? I mean, it's really like, my dad had this very cringy phrase growing up. And Dad, if you ever figure out how to listen to podcasts, I hope you listen to this episode. We're working on it. My dad used to say, "It's like, this is the most fun you can have with your clothes on." And I was like, when you're 13, or Dad, Jesus, God, stop it. But like now I'm like, oh, I kind of get what he was talking about. Like, this is a very good cheeseburger. Really good sex is better than this cheeseburger, but this is a very good cheeseburger. Like,
Right.
Okay, all right, I don't hate it,
Right. That is a perfectly appropriate thing to say, and let everybody else write the script on that. But to be honest with you, I was that person. So in sex school, I like to call it sex school, where we were learning to become clinicians and educators. we had to do this thing called sexual attitude reassessments, where we had to watch essentially porn, different kinds of pornography, and then process our feelings, thoughts, anything about it. This was their test to determine if we were clinically comfortable enough with the subject matter or could get to that subject matter to provide care in that subject, right? So, like, the last thing you want is your therapist to be like, ew, you did that. Right. And I have a face that speaks out loud. So this was like very important to me. I was like, I'm not the blank slate therapist here. I was like, you know exactly what I'm thinking. And so we're sitting in a room and we're watching all different kinds of porn. And I was always the first one in the room when it was true to be like, actually, it was kind of hot. And like, I'm going to sit with a bunch of professionals who don't know each other yet. And I'm going to be like, what, none of you found that sexy? Like, none of you felt something to that? Just me? I'm the only one? Okay, I believe you. I was like, apparently you can't discuss this subject matter with other people. And then we would have all the, oh no, me too, after that. So it always took, like, I was always that person because, again, the thoughts don't stay inside the head, who would say out loud, like, yes, I actually experienced this experience that we're not supposed to talk about in a room full of professionals. I'm going to say that I did. And then everybody else feels a little bit more comfortable after I take that step. So one day you're going to have that guy in the room who's like, yeah, like 4 times just today. And then you're like, we can talk about that later. I hope it wasn't private, but thanks.
It's like 10 a.m. What?
Out his coffee, like, what? So, Rachel, actually, this just clicked. So you went to Widener, right?
Yes.
So that's where I went to grad school.
No way.
That's also where my wife went to grad school. She was there to get a PsyD like I did, but she also did the sex therapy class.
Oh, that's awesome.
So the sexual attitude class, we were living together in Philadelphia. She was doing that class, and she was assigned gore porn.
Oh, great.
So I had gone out to the bar with a couple of guys. I came back, and like the way our living room was set up is that like you walked in and like there was like a wraparound couch and you looked over the couch to the TV.
Yeah.
So my wife was sitting on the couch on her laptop. So I'm looking over her shoulder, obviously seeing her laptop, and I like stop. I'm like,
what are you doing?
I'm sorry, what the
what do I need to know about what you're watching right now?
For as many times as I fantasized about this was not what you were watching.
Right. Were you around the year that they did, for anyone who was like in the program, they actually created a secondary program right around 2014, I think, or 13, 14, where they started providing classes, like support classes for the partners and spouses of the people in the program. Because they're like, your partners are going through it. They're watching all of this stuff. They're turning all sex clinical, which is having a physical response to them, which is usually a lack of response because it's just like overload information. And then like here you are, you're like, what is going on here? So it's like, here, why don't you just like get a little bit of an idea of what's going on with your partner? And then like have support with other partners of people in the program. I thought that was like actually a really sweet thing that Widener put into place. But yeah.
That was right around when my wife was wrapping up the program, but I remember hearing about that and like thinking, once again, great idea, because I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as, I'm going to use the word liberal in the broad sense, right? Like liberal about sexuality, liberal about education, liberal about gender, all that's right. We can assume that sort of moral, ethical high ground you mentioned before, like, well, everybody should feel this way. Everybody should be this comfortable talking about masturbation at 10 a.m. Like, hey, let's tell a story about gore porn. That's a Tuesday. So like meeting others where they are and giving them the tools and avenue to, if nothing else, decrease discomfort. If we can't increase comfort, then like, yeah, that's just a smart idea. That's really cool.
Yeah, but also like if we think of the context of how people are currently watching porn, it's often in the context of that shame experience, right? There's nobody on the other side just being like, oh yeah, I watched that one, right? Like the people aren't having like a book club on their like porn that they're watching, especially because now it's all almost like Instagram style. It's very fast. It's very intense. There's like nothing else going on but like genitals smashing against each other, like, and it's free. So it's very low quality work. Like, as opposed to, looking at older pornography that comes with an entire really bad acted plot, but you kind of get invested in the characters a little bit, right? And so I think like this is also a thing for people with ADHD, right? And also the distinction between how men and women have ADHD, right? The dopamine hit that can be received from pornography is often the impetus for that like fast, let's go through Pornhub. I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. Found something I like enough, and then just, that fast, let's get this through. But then you have the other side of it, which is often the more like social emotional relationship to sex that women have to combat all the time because they're not supposed to want it. And even if they intellectually understand, hey, this is fun, of course I want it, of course I like it, they still grew up in an entire context and wrote full scripts about their own identity around not wanting sex, not wanting this kind of pleasure, that we as women are supposed to be above this primal desire because we're women. And again, this is changing. So we're going to really start seeing more what's happening in Gen Z because they have more information. But again, the more information is sometimes a curse. And so this is why we're likelier to see what people call porn addiction. The DSM does not acknowledge porn addiction. What people are calling porn addiction, we're going to see more of that in men than with women. And we often see love addiction more in women, not because women are emotional and men are not emotional, but because men are robbed of their emotional attunement and because women are kind of bombarded with theirs. It's a reactive approach. What the theory is now, right, when we see people, again, what they're calling sex and love addiction, we're actually more coming into terms with the reality that it's more like OCD than it is like an addiction. So there is an obsessive compulsive element to it, which again is why if you have ADHD, OCD will lend you, right, the compulsion with the impulsivity of ADHD is going to, like, on multiple levels, look like an addictive behavior as opposed to OCD. And so this is why we have to be very diligent and nitpicky about the language that we use and how we move forward, while also understanding, like, I want to be a responsible practitioner in this. So I don't treat that because I wasn't ever trained. Widener will not train us in that because they're like, it's not in the DSM. We can't come to an agreement on what this is or how to treat it. So we're not going to train you in this. That's at least what the philosophy was when I was there. I left in 2015. I don't know what it is now. So I don't know. But, like really understanding the intersection of our spiciness with that, like with the elements of sexuality, because we like novelty, because we like the dopamine hits, right? And again, the way we've been consuming media, in this era versus previous eras, it does affect our sense of self and sexuality, our sense of intimacy and identity and connection. Like, we're losing our sense of connection. We don't know how to talk to each other and how to really be vulnerable with one another. And that's not just a spicy thing, that's across the board. But when you are spicy, it is felt intensely in the body. It is felt like you can feel a block in you. And often it shows up in chronic illness, in chronic pain, or just like the inability to do anything, right? Like getting very distracted and interested in instant gratification. Yeah.
Well, I am blown away and enjoying this so much. We, of course, are running short of time because this is such a fascinating conversation. So, Rachel, we'd love to have you back sometime and just continue this.
Sure. It was lovely.
No, we're glad it felt lovely. Okay. So we're going to pivot into our wrap-up questions. Jake and I each ask a wrap-up question, then we'll give you the floor to send our audience home with some nugget of wisdom. Jake, you want to start?
Yeah. Actually, before I even start, there is one thing I wanted to expand on from what you were saying. And you've reminded me of two specific stories. One, when you were talking about how like people don't just sit around as like a book club and talk about sex and porn and stuff like that. In college, I lived with a bunch of people in marching band, and we were all in drumline. And one of my best friends, like we still keep in touch all the time and see him all the time. I specifically remember a night where it was me sitting on one couch working on homework or something, him and my other roommate on the other couch, just talking about their favorite porn for like 2 hours. And the one just being like, here's my Pornhub app. Like, I love this thing. You know, I use it all the time in the bathroom. Like, I'm like, you're just casually talking about this. Like, it was not typical for me at the time, because the other story is that the only person I would ever really hear all of that kind of stuff from was my bubby, who was like 85 plus at the time. And she's like, she would literally just tell you sex stories for
Yeah.
the whole time. But like, sorry, it just reminded me about all of that. And then,
I mean, Ruth Westheimer, old Jewish lady who brought sex therapy to America,
yeah,
you know, it fits.
absolutely. And like, there's one other thing that I do want to just highlight that we haven't specifically addressed directly, but I just want to like throw it out there, is that you've been talking a lot about like the idea of the self and the idea of the ego, and that in our like the industry and like the sex therapy industry and like everything around sex as a topic, like we just need to get rid of our ego. And the easier that we do that, the easier just to talk about these kind of things, especially when like it's the controversial stuff.
Oh no. No, your ego is a part of you. We can't get rid of our ego.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean like get rid of it. I mean like acknowledge it and be like, okay, like this is me having that feeling. How do I put that aside and let the other people's feelings have the room?
And also recognizing that your ego has its own wisdom too. Often the reason our ego is kind of sharp and harsh and right self-centered is because you actually need to be looking inward. And sometimes we're doing it by pushing other people away or trying to control other people, right? Our insecurities are leading us. But honestly, when we are insecure, it's because our ego hasn't been acknowledged. It's a core part of us. It's a part of our child self. So I say foster it, listen to it, pay attention to it, and don't shut it off. Just be there with it sometimes. But I hear you, right? When our ego is fragile, we need to listen better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which transitions perfectly for me into my question for you, which is, Rachel, what's your favorite word and why?
Oh,
Can be a couple, can be a phrase.
okay. It's hard for me to pick a favorite any. I am truly polyamorous. I love many things. Yeah, there's no hierarchy on that. But just yesterday, I was talking to my daughter about paraprostokians. A paraprostokian is when a phrase ends in a surprising way. So there's a page that I follow that's called "The Last Thing I Want to Do Is Hurt You," but it's still on the list. So it actually, right. So I love the humor of paraprostokians where it just takes you somewhere else and something surprising. And I found that that's also very much an ADHD thing. We like to be surprised because we're very good at patterning and predicting. So paraprostokian, I think is what I'm going to land on.
Thank you for that, because you taught me a new word today.
I have to say, like, that's the first time I haven't known the word. I love this. Okay, Rachel, my question is going to be a little bit more prosaic, but that's fine. If you could have any superhero on speed dial, who would it be and why?
Hmm. Okay. It would be Magneto. Yeah. I feel very connected to somebody who had very true wisdom, who was villainized for his wisdom that came from suffering and reality in the world that, acknowledged something very real and true. So I just want to chat with him.
That is, I know I keep saying like every time we have somebody new on talk about their superhero that they would call, like that might be one of my absolute favorite answers.
Thank you.
I adore Magneto. He's like one of my favorite written characters in Marvel ever.
I know, and I also just want to care about him, I just want to care about him. I just want to I know that Professor X did some version of that. I feel like I could do it better.
Let me save him.
Oh no, not save. I can't save anybody. I'm nobody's hero. I just want to care about him.
I loved the version of Magneto in X-Men 97 where it's like, yo, well, he doesn't have to be that hot. Come on. Distracting.
I'm still overcoming emotions from X-Men '97, but
Well, I mean, just the Gambit episode. We just shouldn't talk about
stop.
Oh, it's on my
Stop.
list. I didn't watch it yet. I know. I have so much. I'm rewatching True Blood for whatever reason. I can't explain it. I just finished Gilmore Girls. Like,
Oh, I'm watching that right now.
that's awesome.
We just finished season 2.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'd love to just have a chat with you about it.
Are all over the pop culture map right now, gang. True Blood, Gilmore Girls, and X-Men.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, Rachel, you definitely will cry in that episode with Gambit.
Uh,
And when it happens, / when you see it,
Don't spoil it.
feel free to let me know.
Oh, don't worry. I'm not. It's not spoiling. It's not spoiling. Okay. Yeah. All right. Next question.
Well, I mean, now it's your outro. You get to leave our audience with a little nugget of wisdom, and then we'll send you on your way.
And where they can find you.
Yes.
Okay, sure. So my nugget of wisdom is that yourself is always looking out for you and might not always do it the way that is helpful. And so when we think of our weaknesses, just understand that they're exhausted strengths. They're strengths that we've just worked and worked and worked to the bone, and they're just really tired. So when you're hard on yourself, think about the thing that you're criticizing yourself for and try to understand what is overworked here right now, because the thing that you're exhausted by is the thing that had helped you survive up until now. So that's my nugget. And you can find me at The Audacity to Heal on Instagram. My website is theaudacitytoheal.com. And if you really want to get in touch with me, you can find my number on my website, and you should text me, because that I will respond to in a much more timely manner than email. I look forward to hearing from anyone.
Well, this was a phenomenal conversation, and I was engaged, and I learned something, and I actually learned many things. We got to share some of our shared connections. So, I mean, just Rachel, you're a delight, and you bridge these areas so effortlessly.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot and feel very activated by this episode in the best possible way, right? Like, it's like, this is really one with sort of like a call to action, like love yourself a little bit more and seek pleasure in many ways, right? However, your polyamorous self would love that, right? So thank you so much for your time and talent.
Thank you for having me. This was awesome.
A real treat. Well, guys, go out and enjoy your lives. Seek pleasure wherever you can. For all of us here at the Nerding Out at Neurodiversity, I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, wishing you a very lovely and wonderful day. You want to say goodbye, Jake?
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. It's always good to be here. And Rachel, thank you again for everything, just across the board.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening.
Bye. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. Nerding Out on Neurodiversity is brought to you by Dr. Matt Zakreski and the team at the Neurodiversity Collective. To learn more about the Neurodiversity Collective or to be a guest on the podcast, please visit our website at www.theneurodiversitycollective.com/podcast. Audio and production by Jake Noonan. Show your support by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and telling your friends about us. Our Instagram and social media handles are at #NoonPodcast, NOON podcast. Your support is appreciated and keeps us going. All discussions presented on this podcast are strictly for informational purposes, awareness, and understanding. The advice presented is not and should not be considered to be therapeutic in nature. If you have any mental health questions, please contact your provider. All rights reserved.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.